Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Amanda Bowen. Thank you for joining us this evening. As always, at the bottom of the screen there, we have your best ways to get a forecast outside of our show. The first is to call our forecast recording line at 1-800-472-0391. That's available 24 hours a day for your area's forecast. If you have internet access, you can also visit us online at weather.gov/Alaska for a 7-day forecast for your area, as well as plenty of other weather and climate information. And finally, if you have any feedback or comments for us, please feel free to email us anytime at nws.ar.tvweather@noaa.gov. We have one winter storm watch that's going into effect for the northern panhandle. That's going to be for Friday night into Saturday night for heavy snow. The main impact area is going to be north of the Taku River, and that is going to be for heavy snow up to 12 inches. So the area just north of the Taku, we're looking more like 5 to 9 inches, but further north and along the Canadian border, closer to 12 inches of snow. So certainly some impactful heavy snow there. And although there's nothing out for it, we're seeing a bit of a pattern change for the panhandle in general. With that same system south of the area that we're going to see snow, will be some heavy rain over the southern panhandle with rainfall amounts of 1 to 2 inches possible. So a busy time period, that Friday night to Saturday night period for the panhandle. Again, that's a winter storm watch in effect for the northern panhandle from Friday night through Saturday night. We'll keep an eye on that for you over the next couple of days and let you know if it gets upgraded to either an advisory or a warning. Taking a look at our satellite imagery for today, we can clearly see that spinning low pressure system just north of the Aleutians in the Bering, that beautiful counterclockwise rotation, that we call comma head shape. It looks like a comma. That is a very mature, developed low pressure system. Out ahead of it, we have a line of clouds that is going to be associated with a trough over the area, possibly bringing some snowfall to southwestern portions of the state today. But either way, that strong low pressure system bringing some strong winds to the Aleutians as well as the Alaska Peninsula today. Elsewhere, we have mostly high pressure in command, so plenty of sun and dry weather, although it does look like we've got some fog, especially over the Yukon Flats today, with that lighter gray being closer to the ground cloud cover or fog in that area on the satellite imagery. So looking at our surface chart for today, we can see that strong low pressure system, 965 millibars, so fairly strong low pressure system. Again, that's going to be bringing winds into the Aleutians as well as the southern Alaska Peninsula. And out ahead of that, we had that band of clouds that may be producing some snow over the inland southwest and YK Delta areas. On the surface chart, we can see in the forecast there is some freezing fog, both for the Yukon Flats and the Yukon lowlands in general across the interior, as well as across the north slope. So remember, for freezing fog, that can create a thin layer of ice on surfaces that can cause a really slippery situation. So make sure to use extra caution if you're out and about in those areas with that freezing fog. Further south and east across the state, we just have some light snow showers potential for the northern Gulf Coast as well as the Panhandle today. But again, probably a mix of sun and clouds with that. Looking ahead into tonight, we have that low pressure system moving further north into the Bering Sea and spreading strong winds into the Alaska Peninsula, as well as some breezy conditions for the southwest portion of the state along the Bering coast. We'll also have heavy rain coming into the area south of Kodiak Island and into the Alaska Peninsula just ahead of that occluded front you can see here on the surface map. Across the interior portion of the state, expect more freezing fog tonight, so that's going to be a threat for any kind of morning commute on Friday morning. And then continuing potential for snow showers across the northern Gulf Coast as well as the Panhandle. Heading into Friday, we're seeing this low pressure system in the Bering Sea evolve a bit. Our initial low pressure system will be dissipating with an occluded front breaking up, still bringing some breezy winds and snow to the southwestern portion of the state, but we'll have another low pressure system developing kind of on that one's tail, with another occluded front coming into the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas. Right on the front edge of that, we do expect some potential for heavy rain on the northern side of Kodiak Island, and it looks like up into the immediate coast along the Gulf of the Kenai Peninsula. So keep an eye out for some heavy rain if you are in those areas. Also looking at some scattered snow across the Prince William Sound area as well as the Yukon Flats, with the continuing potential for some freezing fog in the interior lowlands. And for Saturday, we'll see that heavy precipitation spread all the way to the North Gulf Coast area as well as into the Panhandle. For the Panhandle, this is going to be that time period where that winter storm watch is currently in effect for heavy snow. With along and ahead of this front, that's where we're going to see that heaviest precipitation. Now, behind this low pressure system and this front, we'll start to see things taper off a little bit, although we still will remain to see some chances of snow across southwestern portions of the state and stretching all the way back into the Aleutians. For the northwestern portion of the state over the Chukchi Sea, we will have some breezy winds that will be kicking up some freezing spray. So make sure that you are prepared for that or aware of that if you have any plans to be out in the Chukchi Sea on Saturday. Moving on to temperatures for Friday morning, we're still seeing plenty of cold air in the interior, especially even colder than we saw this morning. So looking at almost negative 20 degrees across much of the interior. A little bit warmer for the north slope as we're getting winds out of the south up there. Temperatures in the single digits to even a couple of double digits for low temperatures on Friday morning up there. As we look ahead to Friday afternoon, not getting very warm across the interior, still mostly negatives or positive single digits, but we do see some warmer temperatures across the southeastern portion of the state where we're going to see those windy conditions as well as that precipitation moving into the area. So some 40s for the Alaska Peninsula as well as approaching 40 along the northern Gulf Coast. Also some 40s for the southern Panhandle on Friday afternoon. For Saturday morning, cold again across the interior. A little bit less cold though for areas from south central all the way down to the southwestern YK Delta, with temperatures only reaching down into the 20s and even some lows in the 30s there. Lows also in the 20s and 30s for the Panhandle. Looks like 26 at Juneau, 22 at Skagway for Saturday morning. And Saturday afternoon, we'll see some relatively warmer conditions over the interior, with most temperatures reaching at least above 0 degrees. Looking like 20s for much of the West Coast, 28 at Nome, 35, a little bit warmer, 35 at Gamble, and then 40s as we get behind that front into the Aleutians as well as the southern Alaska Peninsula. Now for a first look at temperatures for next week. This is going to be Wednesday through Sunday of Thanksgiving week. This is just an outlook, so we're looking at trends more than specific temperatures, but it's looking like for most of the state, the trend is going to be favoring warmer than usual temperatures. Now that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be warm per se, but especially for areas that have been much cooler than usual this week, could be a significant pattern shift for some actual warmer than usual temperatures for the Thanksgiving time period. And also as we look at precipitation, we also see a general trend across the state favoring wetter than usual conditions. Now again, this doesn't mean that everybody's going to see a ton of rain or snow, but especially for areas that have been drier, we could see a significant shift to where there is some kind of rain or snow happening most of the days during this period. And again, this is where looking at Wednesday through Sunday of next week, and that's including Thanksgiving on Thursday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to a look at your aviation weather. We've got IFR conditions Friday morning along the southwest coast and in the eastern Bering and across the Alaska Peninsula. That's going to be associated with that low pressure system moving up into the eastern Bering there. Also, IFR conditions expected in the Yukon Flats on Friday morning and some in the northern Gulf, stretching from the southern tip of the Kenai Peninsula south and east into the Gulf. For Friday afternoon, those IFR conditions spreading a little bit further up the Alaska Peninsula along with that front and that low pressure system continuing to move into the Bering. MVFR conditions for the northern Gulf and improvement for the Yukon Flats to MVFR conditions. Saturday morning, we see spreading IFR conditions further east across the entire northern Gulf and into the southern Panhandle. That's also going to be associated with that same system, although it'll be weakening at this point. Otherwise, VFR conditions for the rest of the state. For Saturday afternoon, we'll see those IFR conditions start to break up a bit, again, as that front and that low pressure system start to weaken and dissipate, although we'll still see IFR conditions for portions of the southwest coast as well as the northern Gulf Coast and the higher terrain of the Panhandle, with MVFR stretching up the Canadian border a little bit. Also MVFR conditions along the North Slope for Saturday afternoon. Pass conditions on Friday, we'll have Anaktuvuk Pass and Adigan Pass both VFR on Friday, Lake Clark Pass MVFR on Friday, and Merrill Pass starting the day VFR, but going to MVFR in the afternoon. So Merrill Pass MVFR on Friday afternoon. Rainy Pass VFR in the morning to MVFR in the afternoon. Windy Pass VFR all day on Friday, as well as Isabel Pass VFR on Friday, and Mentasta Pass VFR conditions on Friday. Tanita Pass starting the day out at VFR and going to MVFR Friday afternoon, and Portage Pass MVFR through the day on Friday. Chilkoot and White Passes both expected to be VFR on Friday. Freezing levels, mostly surface freezing levels along the state with the exception of the Aleutians. We've got a small 2,000 foot area of freezing levels along the North Slope, and then some warm air coming into the northern Gulf and another area of warm air staying south of the Aleutians for Friday morning. A lot of isolated moderate icing on Friday, mostly above 4,000 feet, stretching along the west coast and down into the Alaska Peninsula and Gulf Coast there. Also isolated moderate icing above 5,000 feet for the Panhandle and much of the Aleutians for Friday. Jet stream winds on Friday. We still have our jets staying mostly south of the Aleutians, although some increased winds over the central Aleutians, that jet 120 knots out of the northwest over the Aleutians, but peaking south of the Aleutians at about 150 knots. A secondary jet stretching from the eastern portion of Russia down across the Alaska Peninsula into the Gulf and coming up south of the Alaska Panhandle, 75 to about 90 knots there. At 9,000 feet, we start to see our low pressure system in the Bering with our strongest winds generally on the northeast side of that over the southwest portion of the state, 55 to 60 knots out of the south and southeast. Another maximum south of the Aleutians, 55 to 75 knots out of the northwest. 20 to 30 knots in kind of a secondary jet across the central portion of the state and stretching up to the Chukchi Sea coast. That's going to be 20 to 30 knots out of the south and southeast. And at 3,000 feet, we can see our main low pressure system and then also a developing weaker secondary low pressure system south of the Alaska Peninsula. And ahead of that, with a front, we'll see 50 to 60 knots of wind from across the peninsula and the southwest coast, and that's going to be winds out of the southeast. Finally, we have turbulence on Friday. In that same area where we're expecting all of those winds, the southwestern portion of the state, Bristol Bay coast, the Alaska Peninsula, will also see some isolated severe turbulence on Friday. That's going to be below about 4,000 feet. and then considerable moderate stretching all the way up to the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, Kenai Peninsula, as well as stretching down into most of the Aleutians. That's also going to be below 4,000 feet. Stay tuned for more Alaska weather after this.
Greetings, Sky Spotters. Trace here. Midweek, we're going to get a lovely clump of 2 planets with our beautiful crescent moon, all right after sunset. It's so exciting. Pack an appetizer and head out to Sunset Rock. Every town has a Sunset Rock, right? Once you're all set, look south after sundown on November 18th and find a bright spot near the moon. That's Jupiter. On the next night, the moon is to the left of the other bright light, Saturn. Incredible. I never get over that we can see our planetary pals out there as we orbit this miasma of incandescent plasma. This event is what astronomers call a conjunction. It means sky objects are near each other in the sky. The planets aren't actually close to each other in real life, it just appears so from our position. This conjunction is good practice for next month when we have a great conjunction, so get ready and keep looking up.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and joining me once again is Cindy Preller. She is the Tsunami Program Manager for the National Weather Service in Alaska region. Thanks for joining us again, Cindy.
Thank you, Dave.
We're talking about tsunami awareness and safety here in Alaska especially, and one of the things that has been one of your main focuses is the Tsunami Ready program. What is that, and how do Alaskans find out more?
Awesome. Yeah, Tsunami Ready is a National Weather Service hosted program in partnership with Storm Ready.
Okay.
And it is a program that we conduct with our partners in the state, but it's mostly community driven. So if a community wants to become Tsunami Ready, well, the first thing they need to do is get a hold of me or their local WCM at a weather forecast office or their tsunami team at the state level.
So, and this is something that's a NOAA grant, so there's money available to help encourage the preparedness at the local level there in the city or the village.
Yeah.
What are some of the places that have done this already?
Oh, our oldest Tsunami Ready city is Seward,
Good.
you know, but also Sitka, Homer, Valdez are the, the main players, but we've got several Tsunami Ready communities that I'm very proud of. It takes several years to accomplish this. And so a few of the things that they do is the tsunami risk will be assessed by someone like me or another scientist will help find out, really what their probability is. We'll create an inundation map, an evacuation map. They'll have a mitigation plan. We will set up some partnerships with the schools, make an evacuation shelter, and then they need to practice. But it is the city that owns the program, really. It's up to them. And many cities would like to have sirens, and so we help them get those, and and they practice. They have to practice.
Sure. So let's say I'm driving into a place like Seward that's tsunami ready. What are some of the things I should look for as maybe a visitor so I know maybe where I need to go or can be more aware of my tsunami risk?
Absolutely. The Tsunami Ready signage is really blatant. It's this, blue and white curling wave sign, and there's different shapes of signs that'll show you if you are in the hazard zone or where the evacuation routes are and when you're out of shelter.
Okay. So this is a multi-step process that helps the residents be more aware of their own risk, but then also prepare for when that risk arrives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, many communities sound their sirens daily, some sound them weekly, to make sure everybody knows what they mean. And there's often drills. We have an annual drill once a year. We have Tsunami Awareness Preparedness Week, and that's a good time for each community to do some exercising.
Okay. And is this a program that is unique to Alaska?
Absolutely not. It's national.
Okay.
And all over the country, you'll have the same signage, so it's consistent.
Good. So if I'm taking the kids to California, I should be able to see something familiar.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And, some communities hesitate because they think it'll discourage tourism. And so I would like to tell those communities that what they're actually doing is they're encouraging responsibility.
Sure.
The tsunami's going to happen.
Right.
And it's going to hit every coastline. So, it's not about when, it'll be any time. So the fact that they're showing tourists that they are making steps to be prepared for this, I think would encourage people to want to stay there.
Right, and that would be no different than, say, you or I visiting the Midwest, where we know there's going to be really bad thunderstorms and maybe there's a risk for tornadoes. We're aware of that risk when we go there.
Absolutely. If I see a sign for a tornado shelter, I'm going to remember that.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're just doing a better job of being more prepared with something that's bound to happen again.
I hope so.
Okay. Very good. Where can people go again to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program here in Alaska?
Well, one, there is a Tsunami Ready website. So, just Tsunami Ready,
Google
and that'll
Tsunami
get you there.
Okay.
And then probably the best person for people to contact is their warning coordination meteorologist at their local weather forecast office, which is Anchorage or Juneau, most likely.
Okay. All right. So most of the folks along the Bering Sea coast, again, are not at a huge risk for tsunamis.
No, they don't need to worry about it.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. But always learning to be prepared no matter where you are in Alaska, no matter what the risk, always a good step. And tsunami is a major player in that, as we well know from events like 1964. Okay.
Alaskans are resilient. I really believe in them.
Very good, very good. Well, Cindy, thank you so much for joining us again, and please make an effort to learn more about the Tsunami Ready program in your village and town if you haven't already. We'll be back with Cindy again next time to talk more about the Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska. We actually have a group of geologists working for the National Weather Service, so scratch your head on that one and we'll join you next time. I'll see you next time on Alaska Weather Packs.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And we're back for a look at your marine forecast, starting with the sea ice edge. We're continuing to see some retreat of the ice in the Chukchi Sea due to the south and east winds pushing the ice away from the coast. We're also expecting over the next few days, with the active pattern in the Bering, to see some of that ice along the coast in the Bering melt through the weekend. So those are some changes to keep an eye out for in the coming days. Taking a look at our marine forecast for southeast portions of the state on Friday, we are looking at winds 15 to 20 knots generally out of the south and southeast for the Gulf, with seas about 6 to 8 feet. Winds 15 to 20 knots for the inside waterways and seas 3 to 4 feet there. A big change headed into Saturday as winds in the Gulf come up significantly to 40 to 45 knots out of the south and southeast. We'll also see an increase in winds in the inside waterways, 20 to 35 knots, with those gale force winds for the southern inside waterways, with winds out of the southeast there. Seas across the Gulf are going to be increasing quite a bit to 15 to 20 feet for Saturday. Across South Central on Friday, we are expecting winds to have come up to some extent, especially for the southern Gulf, 40 to 45 knots out of the east. So some high gales to maybe even low storm level winds for Friday for that area around the Barrens between Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island. 25 to 35 knots even outside of that area in the northern Gulf, those winds out of the east and southeast. Seas peaking along with the winds 15 to 20 feet. For Saturday, we'll see the rest of those winds make it all the way up into the northern Gulf. So winds 40 to 50 knots out of the south and southeast. So some storm level winds in the northern Gulf for Saturday, 40 knots out of the east, even in Prince William Sound. And seas will be coming up along with that, 20 to 21 feet, with 9 feet in Prince William Sound and 8 to 12 feet in Cook Inlet on Saturday. For Friday, for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, this is where we'll see our strong gale to storm force winds for this area, 40 to 50 knots of wind generally out of the south and east, although if you're on the north side of the peninsula down by Cold Bay and Sandpoint, more out of the southwest. Seas also coming up with those winds, so we're looking at anywhere from about 14 to 20 or even 22 feet of seas on Friday. As that system passes by on Saturday, we'll see winds and seas coming down to some extent, although still some small craft winds 25 to 30 knots and still some pretty big seas, anywhere from 14 to about 20 feet for this area, 8 feet in Bristol Bay for Saturday. For the Aleutians on Friday, we'll see gales for the eastern Aleutians 35 to 40 knots out of the west, decreasing to small craft advisory winds for the western Aleutians 25 knots out of the west, and seas relatively elevated across the board 13 to about 22 feet. Heading into Saturday, both winds and seas coming down, just 15 to 25 knots of wind out of the west, and seas down to about 8 to 13 feet. For the west coast on Friday, this is where we'll see our strongest winds, especially for the southern bearing. 40 knots of wind with 14 to 18 foot seas, even 35 knots of wind out of the east up in Norton Sound. And as we head into Saturday, for the southern bearing, we'll see those winds come down a bit to 25 to 35 knots, but still 35 knots for the rest of the west coast, generally out of the south and east. For the Arctic coast on Friday, we're looking at 15 to 20 knot winds across the ice cover there. And then again, we'll see that ice retreating in the Chukchi Sea with 15 to 30 knot winds out of the southeast. And heading into Saturday, still about 15 to 20 knots of wind for the North Slope and about 15 to 30 knots still easterly offshore flow for the Chukchi Sea. Recapping our weather, we have our strong low pressure system moving into the Bering tonight, and that's going to be bringing strong winds and heavy rain to the Alaska Peninsula. As we head into the day on Friday, those winds come onshore to the southwestern portion of the state with heavy rain making it into the northern Gulf Coast. Thanks so much for watching Alaska TV Weather.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.